Yeah, bro. Once let me put this right here, guys. You guys already know how it is. You're gonna go over it. You got the topics, the legendary Haiguh right here. Once again, the best Gunlancer in the world, if not one of the best Gunlancer in the world. Sometimes they don't want to say they're the best because some people get mad and shit. But it is what it is. Sometimes you just gotta call it how it is, and they get wanna get mad. It's on them. But now we're just gonna go. He got the topics, and then at the end, if you guys got questions and if you got the time, they can answer. You guys know how it is. And hi, the floor is yours, Papi.
Okay, very good, very good. Hello, everyone. For anyone who may not know me, my name is Haiguh. I also stream, so I've been around Mr. 4K before, but I mainly play Blue Gunlancer, so I've been playing this since the game launched. I've played a very, very little bit of red, but mainly blue. So, for the evolution tree is where we are starting. So this one, you do have a little bit of room to move around with what you want to do. As you guys have probably seen in other videos for different classes. But for the third and fourth line, these are pretty static. So Blue Gunlancer prior to Arc Passive was running Hallucination with Keen Blunt in their build. So having Zealous Smite for the crit rate is super, super important. Obviously, Spec is the main combat stat, so you're putting as much as you can into Spec, the rest of that into crit. For the second line, this is where there's going to be a bit more room to flow, so I'll come back to that right after. For the final line on the fourth line, it's Standing Striker. Standing Striker gets you value. You only lose value on Standing Striker when you get knocked down in combat. So Blue Gunlancer just gets immense value from it because obviously you don't get knocked down rarely ever. So there's no reason to not do it. There's no drawback on it. So it's a great way to get your extra damage here. Now, for the second line, this is where you kind of have a bit of room to make decision on your own. So, limit break is obviously where I'm going right now. That just gives you straight up 30% additional, evolution damage. But you can move things around if you wanted to get more yellow numbers, or if you don't want to have mana problems, anything like that. So you can take 2 points out of limit break and put 2 points into illicit spell because Blue Gunlancer does consume mana.
Right.
So if you are like, let's say you don't have a support in your run, like a static support, and you're pugging a lot, and you don't really trust that the support's going to be casting skills as efficiently, you don't want to worry about having to pop mana food all the time, then illicit spell is still going to give you good damage. You get 10% evolution damage here, and then 10% damage on your skills that consume mana. So it's still 30% on most of your skills. However, your battlefield shield, your X skill, does not consume mana. So you are just snubbing 10% damage off of your battlefield shield. So that's why I opt for limit break, because that evolution damage does apply to that. If you don't have a crit synergy and you don't want to have too many white numbers, you can also go Keen Sense too. I tested this the other day in Trixion. I did 3-minute parses, and Keen Sense 2 Limit Break 1 versus Keen Sense 0 and Limit Break 3 was very, very close. It was like over 3
Interesting.
minutes. Yeah, it was within like 200 million damage difference. It's very, very small. It's could be the difference of one crit or not crit. So very, very similar.
Right.
I think if you want more consistency, if you don't have a crit synergy, you can definitely go Keen Sense. But if you just want ceiling build, or if you have crit sins, then Limit Break is definitely going to be your way to go. Like I said, Battlefield Shield does not consume mana. Your Awakening does not consume mana. That's why I opt not to use things like Illicit Spell.
Mm,
For the Enlightenment tree, you have a little bit of room to move as well. For Blue Gunlancer, this is the big one, or for Gunlancer in general, because everyone was like, oh, the space bar, right? The space bar gets
right.
changed in this tree. I'm going to start with having full ancient accessories, and I'll give you guys some options for if you don't have full ancient. But you're pretty much going down this tree like most classes are going to do. You're just going to go 2 points at the very bottom, Vanguard's Mindset. Vanguard's Mindset is just going to give you the most potential damage when you increase it. Basically, this increases the amount of combat readiness stacks that you can get. So before Arc Passive, you could get three combat readiness stacks, and it was 4% damage per. So when you were at max stats, it was 12% additional
12%.
damage.
Right.
With Vanguard's mindset, you can go up to 5 stacks, so it's 20% additional damage. The duration gets extended, which makes it a bit better. This also is the biggest change for Blue Gunlancer because prior to Arc Passive, you were running a ready attack tripod on Bash, right? So everyone used Bash, and your rotation kind of was based around that, right? You had to use Bash, then use your Shield Bash, your Leap Attack, your Guardian's Thunderbolt, and if your Bash ready attack was not up, then you were not using skills. You did not want to waste damage not having that 40% ready attack buff. Now they've taken that ready attack, that 40% damage, taken it off of a skill, and they've put it into your identity, into your little hamster bubble. So that's what this Vanguard's mindset does. Until you get this bottom line, you still are using Bash and you're still using the same rotation. Even if you have Arc Passive, it's this bottom line that allows you to not be able to use Bash, which allows you to sub out that skill for something else, whether that's a little bit more damage or some utility. So, but this definitely has the biggest change in how Blue Gunlancer performs and how it feels in combat. So once we get down this first column, you have 2 more opportunities to use points on the side nodes. And for me, I put both into strategic moving. This is the forward space bar. I also do this because it just gives you extra damage. If you see, it says after your space bar or your space bar changes to moving forward, it increases your attack speed by a little bit. Can use skills immediately while moving, and Gunlance and normal skill damage plus 1.6%. So this means your red skills, your blue skills go up by 1.6% damage, which is obviously nice. I don't feel up here you get additional crit rate. I feel like the raw damage is going to be better than the crit rate. But the other thing is with the forward space bar, it allows you to animation cancel certain skills, which is definitely more prominent on Red Gunlancer with longer animations, right? Like Surge Cannon, for example, you can use it and spacebar after to kind of start the next animation smoother. Right? So if you, and then I'm spamming Shield Bash, it's a little bit slow. With the spacebar cancel, you can kind of connect it easier, and the same thing goes for other skills. So you can just
yeah, that's crazy, bro.
It's a minor thing, but it allows you to kind of connect skills faster, especially on a class that's as slow and sluggish as Blue Gunlancer. Allowing yourself to connect the skill to the next skill and going off of that just makes the combat feel a bit better. If you wanted crit rate, you could go strategy training as well. You can go like 1 point here for the space bar and then 1 point here just for an extra 1.6% crit. This basically just increases your crit rate by 0.8%, but while you're in your bubble, you get 1.6%. So that's literally just crit rate. If you want the crit rate, you can go there as well. But most people want the spacebar. If you don't have ancient accessories, you can go like this. You can just go to level 3 here and put your extra point in strategic move. You can put 1 here as well. I believe at level 70 with full relic accessories, you would be able to get up to level 3 on the 3rd row and then 2 side nodes. So this is pretty much how you would set it up. If you can only get 1, you can just leave it just like this. You'd be fine to use Arc Passive. I started using Arc Passive when I got 2 pieces of ancient gear. So as soon as you get 2 pieces, I think you're plenty good to start setting up Arc Passive for Blue Gunlancer. For the leap tree, this one is pretty static. You're using Transcendent Power, which is your Hyper Awakening skill damage. Your Hyper Awakening obviously just does a lot of damage. For me personally, I participate in a lot of buses, so there are tighter damage checks, and the Hyper Awakening can be the difference in making certain mechanics very difficult or making them very easy, right? So I want to kind of go all in on the damage that can apply during a bus or during a raid. And then Unleash Power is just your T skill damage. It increases your T skill damage. This is what I go for. If you are having mana issues, correct. Yeah, your T skill does consume mana. You can take a point out here and then put 2 points into instant spell. It makes the casting speed faster, and it also reduces the MP cost. So you can do that as well. I think in KR they are using release potential, but I don't think that applies to us yet because that is after you get this tripod or this, second row thing, because this increases the damage of your T skill, and then this makes it so that you can use your T skill more consistently.
Right.
But until we get that, I'm just gonna stick with the T skill damage because I haven't tested that myself, and this has been what has worked for me, the thing that I'm most comfortable with. I have no
Cheeky.
instant spell and no illicit, and I don't have mana issues unless my support is like just not playing the game or anything like that. So
Blame the
that's
support
it
always,
for
guys. Pretty much, in other words.
yeah, exactly. So but I always keep mana food on my bar just in case stuff hits the fan, you know what I mean? Um next is for the skills. So the cool thing for Blue Gunlancer after arc passive is because of some of the changes with how our damage is applied. Like I was telling you guys with that 42% ready attack thing, we can change some skills around. So shield charge is pretty much the same as before. This second row, if needed, it's 332 is what I run, but the second row is completely up to you. There is a shield option, there is wide hit, which makes it hit a wider area, which could be helpful if you are running past the boss, right? It's going to increase that side portion, right? You see how it kind of creates like a half circle in front of you?
Yeah.
The AoE radius just increases that a little bit. I don't feel like I get much value out of that, so I just opt for quick pace because I mean, I can just show you real quick how different it looks. It's very slow versus if you were to go quick pace level 5, when a boss is running away,
Oh wow, yeah. That's
the shield
huge
charge,
difference. What the?
yeah, you can run after the boss to keep up with them while also still applying damage at the same time. But it's totally up to anyone. The shield you can make arguments for that just to be a bit more tanky while you're using it. But that's just what I opt for. And then for the rune, I use Purple Galewind. I've also had times where I'll use a Vision rune, which is Blue Galewind plus some extra stagger.
Right.
So it just depends on what you're looking for. It depends on if there's like a lot of stagger checks, right? In Aegir, there's a good amount of stagger checks. So for a raid like that, you may want to put that on there. But a Purple Galewind or a Legendary Galewind, since it's one of your slower skills, is perfectly fine as well. For Leap Attack, this skill has, I wouldn't say controversy, but it's the most like no one really knows what to run. There's so many options that you can do for the tripods on this skill. I always say, right, the main thing is, do you want the fat leap, the big one, or
Right.
the double leap? For me, I always go for the double leap. I've preferred it. I've tried fat leap many times, but for me, it just gives me much more fluidity, right? If I want to chase after the boss,
Right.
I can do that. If I need to get around the boss,
You can do
or
that.
reposition myself with the low shock. I feel like the fat leap, you commit yourself to an animation that's so long, you can't spacebar out of it. And if the boss turns into something and you're not in a great position, think of it like Thaymine Gate 3, right? When he does like those red patterns. Imagine you use that fat leap, you go right into a red pattern, your character's stuck on them, right? You're like all up on the boss like this, and you gotta get over here. You try to space bar, you get stuck on the boss, and now you're just like stuck. You die, right? That type of thing is why I don't like Fat Leap. However, if you wanted a more bursty option, that is where Fat Leap would come into play. Usually, Low Shock is more consistent over the longer content, and Fat Leap is better when you're going like mech to mech. And as far as the tripods for it, Leap Attack, I use Enhanced Strike, Shockwave, and Low Shock. You used to use Quick Prep before Arc Passive on Leap Attack. The reason for that was because of the ready attack tripod on Bash. Because you only had 6 seconds and you were tying it into your rotation,
Right.
this allowed leap attack to be up for every portion of your rotation. So you would use Bash, Shield Bash, Leap Attack, and then you would use your Guardian's Thunderbolt. And then for the second half of your rotation, you would Bash, Shield Bash, Leap Attack into Shield Charge. So the Quick Prep allowed it to be up every time you used your Bash, which is why you ran Quick Prep. But now that we don't need that, we don't have to run Quick Prep and we can opt for more damage. For this one, I always leave the Legendary Galewind on there. I don't change that at all. For the Shield Shock, this is a smaller portion of your damage for a skill, but it is very good for a lot of things. So I run 1-3-1 on it. Excuse me. For the first row, obviously Quick Prep. The second row gives you incoming damage reduction 24.6% for 10 seconds.
Oosh.
Obviously, for Blue Gunlancer, they are known for being super tanky. Oh, they can just tank all the mechs. They can tank all the mechs. However, your identity down here This shield, that's what makes you so tanky. If that is gone, then you're not tanky anymore, right? You're not invincible. You can just take a lot more damage than most classes. But once this runs out, then you're a feather. You can't
Right.
like you want to make sure that you're staying within that. And so when you come out of Battlefield Shield, for example, like I just used, the more damage you tank for your team inside Battlefield Shield, the more meter it's going to give you back at the end. But if you don't tank any damage, if you're just using Battlefield Shield for damage, you're left with this much meter. And so you only have like 8 seconds or so in here within your damage, and having that incoming DR can be the difference in making that extend for an extra second or not. So that's why I like using the DR. And then second turbulence makes it so that it's a combo skill, so you can use it twice. Oh, wrong skill. You can use it twice. That's also why I have the quick recharge on it. Both of those procs can proc quick recharge. It's also super healthy for your adrenaline stacks for maintaining those. So shield shock is a very helpful skill. It's also got pretty good stagger. If you were, depending on the content you're running, the rune here is super interchangeable. You could put a rage there, quick recharge there. You can put an overwhelm, vision. You can put a lot of things here. I don't change the quick recharge though, just because you get so much potential for value. Quick recharge is going to apply to your Battlefield Shield as well. It's going to apply to your Battlefield Shield cooldown, your T-skill cooldown, and Battlefield Shield is a 1 minute, 30 second cooldown. So every time quick recharge procs, it drops it by like an extra 10 seconds, which is the difference between having it up for the next mech and not having it up for the next mech. Now for Shield Bash, this is your new synergy applier. Before we used to use Bash that would apply our defense synergy, now or our defense reduction synergy, and now we're using Shield Bash for that. So on the first line, we're taking armor destruction. For the second line, we're taking weak point detection, which is obviously extra damage, and then additional hit. For the rune on it, I use poison. I can't remember where I heard it from, but I'm pretty sure poison does more damage than bleed. And the duration of the ticking damage doesn't really matter, because with Shield Bash, you can keep up poison 100% of the time. And in my experience, it's just a good bit of extra damage because we don't use nimble movement. So this is what we used to use right before arc passive. It makes it very fast, which is nice. But it's definitely slower now, but it's not slow enough that I want to sub out the extra damage from poison. If you wanted to, though, you could put overwhelm on here. Same thing as like shield shock. You could put the quick recharge on there. You can put bleed, poison, overwhelm, vision, gale wind. You can put like literally any rune on this. It's just personal preference at that point. For the Surge Cannon line, I'm going to come back to that later because that one is really interchangeable. For Shout of Hatred, this is your taunt. This one pretty much does not move. You have 131. This is MP cost. Obviously, I run a focus rune on there as well. It is a skill that you are using pretty much on cooldown in most raids, and it consumes a lot of mana. You don't want to have mana issues, so there's no really better option here. For the second line, I run Shield. This makes it so that after you taunt, you get some extra bulkiness. That adds an extra 131,000 shield HP to my shield. So that just makes me so much more tanky for 4 seconds. And then the bottom line, that doesn't change because that's your front and back attack synergy. So that obviously stays on. Depending on the content you're doing, you could opt for Lingering Taunt. All this does is it extends the duration in which you have aggro, essentially. So if there are certain raid scenarios where you're taunting the boss and you have aggro for an extended period of time, or it's like a boss that turns a lot, then you could use that as well. Think of things like Kai and Gale or Echidna Gate 1. But right now, Aegir, you can't taunt. Thamine Gate 3, you can't taunt. Those are like the main ones. But same thing, Thamine Gate 1 and a little bit of Thamine Gate 2. You could make an argument for using it, but most of the time, you're just going to opt for shield just to make yourself a bit more tanky. For Dash Upper Fire, this one is also slightly changeable if you wanted to, but only if there is absolutely 0 counters in the raid. But I use Quick Prep. I only have 4 skills to put into it. Obviously, I put the rest into my other skills for damage. So I just use Quick Prep for having my counter up more consistently. I put an Overwhelm on there to make it do a bit more stagger. You can use any of these tripods, so they're all pretty decent if I'm being real. So excellent mobility just makes you go farther when you counter, so you can cover more distance if the counter is far away. Think of like Echidna Gate 2, you know, when she when you're in the basement and she flies away into the
Right,
counter, she
yeah.
kind of like dashes away. If you need to catch up to her, you can do something like that, right? um
Damn.
so that's an option. You can also use nimble movement, which just increases the attack speed. If you want to just
Faster.
be a faster counter, you can do that as well. Quick prep for me, I just like it because it makes it available more consistently because it's a 16-second cooldown,
Yeah.
right? So this just kind of reduces that. If you do have the option to um, get it all the way to level 10, I know like depending on your level and where you're at, you can have a different setup for skill points. So if you are able to get it to 10, you can use extra shell. The second line really doesn't matter. It doesn't do a lot of damage anyways. So if you want wide hit, you can. If you want weak point detection, you can. This line, I'm not gonna lie, the AoE radius, I don't even notice it. There's never been a time where I'm like, oh yeah, if I did not have AoE radius, I was not gonna hit that counter. So it's completely up to you. But extra shell is actually pretty good. So extra shell makes it so that there is 2 extra pops, and all 3 of those hits count as a counter.
Wow.
So that's a counter, that's a counter, that's a counter. All 3 of them can
Damn.
count as a counter. So even if you go in a little bit early, like if you
Right.
try to counter prematurely, if the second or third hit land, you'll still get a counter on
Damn.
the boss. It's also going to give you extra stagger because it's an extra hit
Right.
on the boss.
Damn.
So that's if you were able
What
to get
the
it to level
fuck?
10 and you wanted to use that. But like I said, I opt for quick prep.
Jesus Christ. Qué poderoso.
And lastly, there's Guardian's Thunderbolt or Guardian's Thundercrack after the name change. This skill you have not changed the tripods on it since the beginning of Regulus' creation of Arcasia. This is your biggest damage skill, 100%. You want to land this as much as possible. 3, 2, 1 are the tripod lines for it. It's been the same line since February 2022. You've always used this. But I will give a little bit of like tech for it. Guardian's Thunderbolt hits in a cross. It hits in a cross formation. So that is something that you can take advantage of. For a while, I didn't understand how it hit, but it is like a circle, and then there's a cross that expands from the circle, and it is based off of your character's direction. So if I face up here, it's going to be a T, right? It's going to be like a cross, up and down, left and right. But if I face like a diagonal direction, it'll be like an X, right? It's an X formation. You can take advantage of that when you are looking to apply damage. If you know that the boss is going to be dashing towards you, if the boss is going to be going over here, you can take advantage of that and use it this way so that it extends outwards. Also, another good example is like Argios, right? The new Guardian raid. When you're fighting the boss and you want to apply your damage, Guardian's Thunderbolt is your biggest damage. You can still hit the orb while hitting the boss. So you can point your mouse at the orb while you're like on the boss. Your Guardian's Thunderbolt will hit both. So you can take advantage of the extra range on there. And if you're not sure how the attacks land, it's just based off of where your character is looking. So you can take advantage of that when you're trying to land the skill.
Yeah, this guy is crazy, guys. Este tipo está a otro nivel,
For
oíste. Diablo.
For that rune, I
Yeah.
put legendary Galewind. If you wanted to put purple Galewind on Guardian's Thunderbolt, you could as well to exchange it for shield charge because shield charge is a little bit slower. But that is completely up to you. Otherwise, I would leave a Galewind on there. If you were in like a stagger bot build, you probably wouldn't even be using the skill. But if you were, it has decent stagger, so you could put Overwhelm on there as well. And the last one is this line, Surge Cannon. So the reason I want to come back to this one later is because this is essentially where we had Bash before. So before Arc Passive, or not even technically before Arc Passive, until you get this last Vanguard's Mindset, you're still using Bash. Once you get Vanguard's Mindset, you can take Bash off because you don't need that tripod.
Right.
So you can put a plethora of different things in that spot. So Surge Cannon is obviously, people recognize this from Red Gunlancer. It's one of their biggest damage skills. You can use this on blue. Obviously, you don't have supercharge and you don't have swiftness, so it is much slower than on Red Gunlancer, but it does do some extra damage. In my experience of using it, I've seen it hit for upwards of like 400 to 500 million, which is pretty
Damn.
wild, being the fact that I don't have Master Brawler and stuff like that. But this also does apply extra stagger, right? It has max stagger. So when you're in things like Haiguh or when you're in things like Echidna where there are certain stagger checks, this is going to get a good amount of value as well on top of being extra damage. Over the course of a long raid, the way Shield Shock performs is the longer the raid, the bigger portion of your damage Shield Shock is going to have. So if it's like a 20-minute raid, you're going to have probably closer to 7 to 8% of your damage will be Shield Shock. Surge Cannon will be the opposite. So Surge Cannon and Charge Stinger, if you are going more mech to mech, if it's like an older raid where you're pushing it very quickly and you're able to just kind of use it and then the boss goes away and then you can use it again and the boss goes away, Surge Cannon is going to get a higher percentage of your pie. So that's when Surge Cannon could be closer to like 6 to 8% of your damage contribution, and then Shield Shock will be closer to like 4 to 5. So these are going to play opposite roles in terms of your damage pie. The longer the raid, Shield Shock will do more. The shorter the raid, Surge Cannon will do more, assuming you are using them effectively. If you don't like Surge Cannon, I've also seen people on Korea use Charge Stinger, but Charge Stinger is also pretty wonky to use as a Blue Gunlancer just because of how slow the skill is. Let me get a rune real quick. On there. It is.
Damn, yeah.
Yeah, it's super slow. Super slow. But you can also just get some extra damage out of it. Obviously, it's not doing a lot in Trixion. I haven't built anything up, but it does a decent amount of damage. I usually prefer Surge Cannon because of the tech you can do with it. As far as the tripods, it's just the same as Red Gunlancer. You would just use the same damaging tripods as Red. But I'm going to show you why I prefer Surge Cannon if I'm going to be using one of these. I prefer Surge Cannon because Surge Cannon you can also like use from the side if you're trying to reposition. That why is Charge Stinger still on my bar? Oh dang it. There we go. If you're on the side of the boss, that's too far.
It's so hit.
If you're on this, you see how it gets a frontal attack afterwards. You can like push yourself into position with it.
Oh wow.
So if you're not actually in front of the boss, you can still get the frontal attack on it, which is why it's nice to use. Also, it just does extra damage, extra stagger. You can use either or. But the real juicy thing is if you want to use Nella.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you. I was gonna ask you. I was gonna ask you that.
This is the spot for if you wanted to use Nella.
Right,
When you
right.
stub out Bash, you can put Nella. The amazing thing about how Blue Gunlancer is performing right now,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be so honest. Before you would use Dash Upper Fire, and if you were putting Nella on your bar, you were subbing out Shield Shock. Now you're subbing out Bash, which you completely don't need, and the damage difference is minimal, very, very minimal. So I always recommend if you can get value out of Nella, use it.
It's huge.
It is, yeah, it's not only is it huge value, but it's not as great of a damage loss as before, right? Before,
That's
if you drop Shield Shock, Shield Shock was about 7 to 8% of your damage. You're just completely removing that from your kit. You're removing the extra stagger, you're removing the quick charge procs, you're removing all of that just for Nella. And Nella gets good value, but obviously a lot of people want to do damage. But now you can put Nella on and you're not facing as big of a damage loss because like I said, Surge Cannon can be upwards of like maybe 3% of your damage total contribution. I use it for more stagger because I don't really need Nella, but in raids like Haiguh, where you're going to get really good value out of that Purify, then Nella is going to be the way to go. For Nella, the tree, I'm going to go over the tripods as well for Surge Cannon and Charge Stinger and the runes. But 3, 2, 2 is what you're going to be using for Nella. If you wanted to, you could also use Leadership. Survive is what applies the shield when you pop Nella, and Leadership increases attack speed. A lot of people don't use this because obviously you want the shield. Nella in itself just applies DR to your team for 6 seconds, right? It says damage to all party members within a 24-meter radius minus 25%. So the skill itself applies damage reduction, and then this last line is what gives you the shield itself. But if you don't need the shield as much and you just want the DR, you can get the Leadership tripod, and that's going to make your skills feel so much faster for those 6 seconds. and that applies to your whole team, which is why that's really nice. And you still keep the purify. You can have the purify on there with the attack speed, so you can use either option if you wanted to. This second line is also pretty good value for Nella if you are doing something where you don't need excuse me, if you're doing a raid where you don't need a purify, you can use effectiveness, and that's just going to increase the DR on Nella to make you a bit more bulky while it's active. And then lingering power just increases the duration that DR is applied to you and your team. When I'm using Nella, I always use quick prep, and I'll use a focus rune on there because it consumes a lot of mana. And for charge stinger, you're using 222. For surge cannon, you're using 332. And then on surge cannon and charge stinger, you would want to opt for like your legendary gale winds or something that increases your animation speed, because obviously I just showed how slow the skills look in action. I was using a vision on it before, but that's just because of the buses that I've done where the stagger checks are a bit more tight. I want to increase the attack speed, obviously, but also I like the extra stagger on a skill that does max stagger, like Surge Cannon.
Jesus Christ,
Okay.
bro.
So next is gems. For gems, you're pretty much just rocking damage cooldown on your main 5 skills. So damage cooldown, damage cooldown, damage cooldown, damage cooldown, damage cooldown, and then I run a cooldown for taunt. If you were looking to sub out any skills or sub out any gems, maybe you want to put a gem on Nella, or if you want to put a gem on like Battlefield Shield, you can. The first place I would say to look is your shield charge, or not, excuse me, shield. What is this? Shield shock. There we go. Shield shock cooldown. If you can take out any gem, this would be the first one that you're looking at. The rest of them, I really would not recommend taking out. Shield shock, I like to have. It feels more fluid in the rotation. You have it more consistently. It's a quick recharge. You want that up as soon as possible. But if you were, you can also take out like maybe shield charge cooldown. I don't really know why people would do this. I'm just trying to give people options in case they wanted to move some gems around. Shield shock that one is definitely like you can move that. It's not a huge difference. The rest I would recommend not touching. The taunt, especially, because obviously your taunt applies synergy. It's a taunt. It's your meter gain. All of that stuff is super, super important. And engravings. These are pretty static, if I'm being real. There are maybe 1 or 2 options that you can change out with stabilized status. And the main one would be barricade. So I know when people see Blue Gunlancer, they're like, Blue Gunlancer without barricade, why would you not do that?
Right.
Now, the same reason that I don't want to use illicit spell. I don't want to use illicit spell because why? Because the mana is not consumed from Battlefield Shield. When you use Battlefield Shield, you are not given a shield. So the first hit, you pop. When the second hit goes off,
damage.
That's for my pet. Hold on, that's for my pet. My pet trying to sabotage me. When the damage goes off, there's no shield applied. So unless your support puts a shield on you, or if you use Nella before entering, you are not going to have a shield active when the damage applies. And the second hit is the one that does the more damage. Right? 126 mil. So barricade will not apply to that at all. So if you use barricade, it is definitely more friendly and you don't have to worry about like uptime on it, but it is not applying to Battlefield Shield. I will say Battlefield Shield is not a massive portion of your damage contribution. It was before Arc Passive, I was getting anywhere between 7 to 8% of my damage was coming from Battlefield Shield. But now, because I don't run a gem on it, it's usually closer to like 2 to 3% of my damage. But if it's optional, I don't want to snub it 16% damage, right? I'd rather just leave, or the 14% damage. I'd rather leave that on that skill because it's just doing 14 or 16% more, right? So you definitely can use barricade, but like I said, your Battlefield Shield is just not going to get
the value
out of that. Exactly, right? So you can use stabilized status for that. The reason I don't like using stabilized status is because when you're in a raid and your supports are buffing, everyone looks at their HP. This is how my HP looks all the time. It doesn't matter. This is what my HP looks like. So I can't tell if I'm within, if I have no HP or full HP, it's still going to look like this pretty much.
Right.
So I can't tell if I'm under 65%. And when, we got Serenade of Courage. We got the attack power buff. We got all these different things going on. I'm not gonna stop mid raid to look for this little yellow lady. Like I can't. So when I'm atroing, I'm not trying to do math. Am I above 65%? I can't. So I'm too lazy to be doing all that. Yes, it is technically more damage because the battlefield shield, but that's why I don't like using stabilized status, is simply because I can't be bothered to look for her on my buff bar. I'm like, I'm just gonna do what I gotta do.
So mainly it's like a min-maxing situation type thing, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And you could technically use like MP efficiency, I guess, if you wanted to. But like I said, same thing for illicit spell. All of these skills use mana and your T skill, but your awakening doesn't and your battlefield shield doesn't. So you want to obviously make everything in your kit do as much damage as it possibly can. And for the stone, damn, I haven't really thought about stones since Arc Passive, if I'm being real. Obviously, Grudge Adrenaline is going to be like your best in slot kind of thing. For me, with my Limit Break 3 setup, I have around 70% crit. With Keen Sense, it's closer to 80% crit. So you would like as much crit as you can possibly get for buying like the extra adrenaline books. But as far as the stone, any of these pretty much work. You just want outgoing damage. So Grudge Cursed Dog, Grudge Adrenaline. If you have Barricade, all of that would work. I would assume Grudge Barricade 3%, 6%. Shit. I mean, yeah, any of them will work. It's all interchangeable. You could do stabilized status as well. Any of them work.
That's good.
For your awakening skill and your hyper awakening, this is raid dependent. Depends on what you're doing. For Blue Gunlancer, I guess the real question is if you can get value out of the defense awakening. If you cannot get value out of the defense awakening, then you use the crit one. So within this awakening, your entire team, everyone on your team, or excuse me, everyone in your party is going to be status ailment immune, push immune, and they're going to receive damage reduction. So if there are things that would, like the blue telegraphs that stun you, if you can like guardian tune that kind of thing, then this awakening will protect you from that. So if there are certain patterns where you want everyone to be able to stay in and greed and you can get value out of that, then this awakening is going to be better. The other thing is battlefield shield, for anyone who maybe hasn't been using it or isn't too familiar with it. It's kind of like a mini version of that awakening, except it's only on a minute 30 cooldown. That's why I like using battlefield shield, right? I've been talking about it as a damage contribution, but when you're in this, your whole team, when they're inside the circle, they're push immune.
Yeah.
Oh, so you can use that. Yeah, you can use that for your team. If like Aegir Gate 2, towards the end of the gate, you can fall off the map. You can use that to protect people from falling off. Same thing like towards the end of vaults, and you think of scenarios like that where people can fall off the map. You can use this because everyone within this circle that's in your party is push immune. And also when everyone is within this circle, all of their damage is funneled to you. So it gives you a shield of 700k HP.
Yeah.
And all of their damage gets funneled to you. So the more damage that they take, the more damage that you take, and the more damage that you take because of that, the more meter it'll give you back afterwards. And it'll also increase the amount of damage that battlefield shield does. So because I can usually get value out of the push immune with battlefield shield, I only look at the awakening for if I can get status ailment immunity value. Because the push immunity I can use battlefield shield for, but the status ailment immunity I cannot do with battlefield shield. So if there is certain patterns that will apply stuns or paralyzations to your team and you want them to be able to greed in that scenario, then you're going to get pretty good value there. But otherwise, you're just using Lance of Judgment for damage. It's also a crit synergy. So it gives you 10% crit to you and your party mates. And I mean, look at your kit. You have a taunt, you have a head back attack synergy, you have a defense shred synergy, you have a purify, potential attack speed increase, crit rate synergy with your awakening, push immunity and battlefield shield.
Best class in the game.
You're like a walk-in like battle item pack. Like you can just do whatever you would use a battle item for. You can just have in a Blue Gunlancer's kit. So that's sometimes I wish I did more damage, but when you look at it from that standpoint, it's understandable, right? If they made you do too much damage on Blue Gunlancer, it'd be ridiculously broken because of everything that you have in your kit, right? So, but I used
Facts.
having this available for certain like pushes. If you're trying to push the boss down to a certain amount of lines, obviously that's an extra 10% crit rate for the team. And so the same thing applies for the Hyper Awakening. They both do, excuse me, a good amount of damage. So it's just dependent on where you're going to get the value. If you're going to use it for damage and the crit rate, or if you're going to use it just for damage and then like the defense afterwards. And the last thing is the rotation. The rotation is
The most important thing. Can I ask you a question before I forget my thought?
yeah, go for it.
The X, bro. The X can, on 4-2 with the little hands. Can you use the X and immune it to your teammates?
On 4-2 with the little hands.
Yeah.
Which one are you?
And T-mine.
You're talking about like while you're doing the stagger check?
Yes, yes. You know that's.
I mean,
Can
so yes and no. So the issue with the hands is the hands do push you.
right.
So
Oh yeah.
the direct answer to your question is yes, you could use it and protect your team. However, the hands also apply a debuff, and when you get 5 stacks of the debuff, you die.
Right.
So if you can protect them from 1 or 2 hits, yeah,
Right,
100% you could use that.
Okay.
But you just don't want people to tank too many because then they'll die
No,
regardless.
definitely, yeah.
But if you are a Blue Gunlancer that maybe your group is a bit newer to 4-2, I would recommend using Guardian's Protection.
Yeah.
Because you can awaken during that, and then they don't have to worry about getting pushed during that pattern.
Right.
But you could use for 4-2 and 4-3, Blue Gunlancer is you get so much value out of its kit. You got to think of like the patterns where he starts flying in the air and he puts those the blue and red patterns on the ground.
Yeah.
You can battlefield shield that if you're looking to gain more meter to push him to the identity mech. If he's doing he has that one pattern where he puts his sword up above his head and he starts turning and there's all like the red puddles on the floor. That one you can battlefield shield. When he jumps up in the air and starts spinning like a little, Ramus ball.
Yeah.
You can battlefield shield that. You can battlefield shield a whole lot in Thamon. I won't lie. I've done every raid in this game's release on week 1 as Blue Gunlancer, and Gate 4 Thamon was the most fun I've ever had playing Blue Gunlancer because I felt like I was able to do a good amount of damage and I got so much value out of my kit. It was actually insane.
That's good to know. That's crazy.
Now, the rotation is, I know some other classes, it's pretty important. For Blue Gunlancer, I won't lie, it's not that important. So it's pretty, you can pretty much, it's pretty easy now. So before you would bash, taunt, bash, and you had like a set skill rotation.
Right.
Now, not so much. The main thing is your damage is applied only when you're in defensive stance. So you just want to stay in defensive stance as long as you can. So I usually open with the taunt. Then you want to use shield bash to apply your synergy. And then from there, you're pretty much just using your skills on cooldown.
God, wait, what the fuck was that?
That was my T skill.
Oh, okay, damn.
The other thing to keep in mind when you're doing your rotation on Blue Gunlancer is this is probably the only thing that I dislike about Arc Passive Blue Gunlancer and how it's changed is remember before I was talking about using stabilized status over barricade. So before my damage was coming off of like when I'm in my identity, the only boost I was getting was the barricade damage. So as long as my bash was up, I was still technically doing the same damage versus in my shield versus out of my shield, as long as my ready attack buff was up. But now that's not the case. I need to be inside my shield in order to do my damage. So if you are using battlefield shield and your taunt is not up, you are only going to have this much meter to work with, which is not as much. So you have to be very careful when you battlefield shield if you do not have your taunt up. And that'll become more prominent the longer your rotation goes on, because sometimes you have to value the value that you can get from battlefield shield as opposed to its overall, like worrying about your own internal setup, right? Like if I use it there because my teammates are about to get knocked down, I have to wait 5 seconds for my taunt to come back up for me to get that meter back, because I could use like shield bash to give me a bit more meter, but now I just use shield bash and it was missing 40% of its damage. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
you have to be careful with things like that. As you're using your rotation, whenever your space bar is up, you just want to use it to try and cancel animations, make it a bit smoother, but it also gives you the attack speed from it. So you want to have that up as much as you can, since it's a class that pretty much casts super slow.
Yeah. Blue Lancer is stupid right now, huh?
It feels pretty good. I won't lie. It feels pretty good. I won't lie.
Yeah.
But yeah, you ultimately shield shock. You just want to cast it as much as possible. It has your quick recharge rune. Like I said, that's going to apply to battlefield shield as well. So if it procs, you can see it'll drop a whole bunch of seconds off the cooldown. So that'll be really, really nice, just for using it more consistently and stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the rotation of it. There's not, you don't really have to think too much, as long as your synergies are up as much as you can get them. And then I guess the only other thing I'll mention is your T skill is a frontal attack. So if it's optional, you should look to hit that on the head, because on the head, for those who don't know, frontal attacks gain 20% damage, 10% stagger when you are using them on the head. So if you are using it, you should use it on the head, but if you can't, it's not the end of the world, but you should if it's optional.
Damn, bro, what the? Yo, so much. This is insane. We have to watch this video like 100 times because there's so much information. I'm not even trolling, but let's go to the question. Better question. What's the other synergy skill they got? Or better question, what makes so he can ignore applying synergy after the first one? I think there's only one synergy, right?
Yeah, so shield bash, you want to use that pretty much off cooldown. It lasts for 8 seconds,
and then you have
the skill's cooldown. Yeah, it's a 6-second cooldown. So even when it's up, you still have a few seconds to apply it again. So you just want to apply it as much as you can, pretty much. Yeah, it's also going to line up with your poison. So the poison never leaves.
Damn.
That's why the bleed doesn't really matter, because the poison does more damage per tick.
Spanish? No, you have to put it on Google on the video. You choose Spanish, and the translation was the Spanish guy. Ya, lo tienes que ponerlo en el video, papi. Any questions, guys? Diablo, bro, this guy's crazy, guys, huh?
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, you can also ask me when I'm live or on my YouTube or anything like that. I can answer questions.
Yeah. I'm speechless with this guy, bro.
Yeah, I try to cover as much as I can, so that hopefully I try to answer any potential questions and stuff like that.
That's why nobody got questions, because like, yo, wait, what? So no chance to activate the R passive with one egg piece, question mark.
I haven't looked into that. I did hard mode on week 1, so I just started with 2 pieces. I can't imagine. I don't think with 1 piece you would ever be at a damage increase for it in comparison to your previous build. How many? Shit, how many?
He can do 2 for 1 and do the scrapper too. Hey, you have a scrapper, right, Haiguh?
Yeah, I have shock.
Oh, shock, yeah. Next weekend, guys. He's busy. I was able to get him this week because, back and forth. He work on weekends, different schedules, so it's hard. Coordinate. Oh, yeah, you got Audi too, right?
Yeah, I play Barrage, yeah.
Damn, bro, yeah. Maybe if you're not so busy, because I haven't found content creator for those.
Yeah, I mean, I can do them
So next weekend if you have time.
Yeah, I told my general manager I asked to go in a little bit later today, so it was she understood when I explained to her the situation. I said, "Yeah, man, this Spanish creator, he's like the biggest thing over the Spanish people. He wanted to interview me. They said, "Oh,
shit,
okay, yeah, you can come in a little bit later." I said,
yeah, he got shot, guys. I was talking about how many Gunlancers he has. I think he got only one, right? You have only one?
No, I have 3.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I have 2 ults. But yeah, I have my main 6 are 1680 right now, so these are the main 6 classes that I play.
Damn, so you got the Audi and the Scrapper, bro.
Yeah.
Hey, Les. I use the shield shot. Bro, there's so many things that I want to go back to the video and learn because I think like 99% of the things apply to me. That's why I want to
Yeah, I
bring
mean,
main people because they just know so much about the class, bro.
what about keeping Bash in the rotation and use Stagger Tripod instead for more stagger? I think you could opt for something like that, but you have to think about the potential value that you're getting because at that point, you're subbing out Nella for that. I could see an argument maybe for subbing out Dash Upper Fire for putting Bash back in and getting a bit more stagger on there. But if you wanted to have a similar setup to before, where you have two counters, where you have Bash and Dash
That
Upper
type of fire,
Fire,
right?
I don't. I think you are losing way too much potential just for a little bit of extra stagger, because you're losing a potential purify or attack speed, shield, or surge cannon extra damage. And I'm pretty sure surge cannon is going to do more stagger and more damage than Bash as well. So I can't really see an idea or a concept where this is, like I said, if you want to sub out Dash Upper Fire, I can maybe see that applying. Um, but that would be like the only thing that I would sub out for it. But Dash Upper Fire is a way better counter, anyways.
I'm putting in points on crit. Is that good? El Sedek has another question with the Thanks, Haiguh. El da Forsen. Ya lo que leyenda, Haiguh. What the hell,
Uh,
bro?
I use Shield Shock with Nimble Movement to make up for it lost from Shield Bash, also on our press. So I don't like forward dash and put points into crit. Is that good? You can. It's totally up to you. For me, I opt for the forward spacebar, not because I like the forward spacebar, but because of the extra 1.6% damage. When you are adding crit rate versus adding damage, you have to really get into the nitty gritty of calculating how it's going to apply to your damage. The way I look at it is if you were going to get a yellow number regardless, the crit rate doesn't matter,
Right,
right? You can have 60% crit, 50% crit. All that matters is if you crit. So
right.
you can increase your crit as much as you want. You can get to 90% crit. If you
And
don't
not
crit, it
crit.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's true.
So whereas the damage is going to apply whether you crit or not. That's how I like to look at it. But as a keen blunt class, you can look into that. Excuse me, but I would at the very least only go 1 point into strategy training and keep the strategic move for the extra damage there as well. I think that would give you, for me, I think having two here, the normal skill damage plus 1.6% is going to give you more value than the 3.2% crit rate. But that is, excuse me, totally preference on depending on like if you were just that unhappy with yellow numbers.
Right. Diantre. What the hell, guys? That's crazy. El
I don't
Haiguh.
like forward dash.
El legendary Haiguh, bro. Yo, Haiguh, so next
For
weekend maybe?
Yeah, I mean, just let me know what day, and I'll see if I can ask my manager to go in a little bit later again. I don't mind.
Yeah. Because it's so hard for me to find content creators that play every class. Like I don't know anybody like with a summoner, with a Aeromancer, so I'm like just looking
Uh,
through everybody,
yeah,
bro.
I can I can see if I can ask some people. I have a friend who plays summoner pretty well. I play summoner as well, but I think he's better than me, so I can see if he would be down to do it. But yeah, I can if there's certain classes that you don't have, I have a
Yeah,
lot of friends that play classes at a super high level, so
yeah.
um you just let me know. For nimble movement on shield shock, I can see that being like a comfort pick here. If you wanted just to increase the speed of your rotation. But in my opinion, I think having taking a 10-second cooldown down to a 6-second cooldown is going to be way too much value. Also, let me double check. I haven't checked this before. I
Yes, to
don't.
that question. Yes, to that question. Because the thing is, so Bash now the that skill that he just used has the synergy instead of the Bash. So no use up
So,
that.
so the other big reason that we got rid of Bash is because of this tripod, right? Normal skill damage plus blank percent for 6 seconds. They took that tripod and put it onto your bubble. So that was the main reason we used Bash before, was to apply that extra damage. But now it is on your arc passive. So when you go to the Enlightenment tree, Vanguard's mindset, while in defensive stance, gain battle preparation effect, normal skill damage plus 42%.
Yeah.
So as long as you're in your bubble, you have it.
Yeah, that's why he said earlier on the video. I don't know if he was here. He explained the reason why and when you can change sub the badge. You want to do it at 1680 with that skill right here.
Yeah, JBots is correct. So yeah, until you are 1680 and get Vanguard's mindset, you are still using Bash. Yes.
Jesus. Qué poderoso. Well, guys, he gotta go to work and busy guy. He work on weekends. Much love, Haiguh, bro. Like I really appreciate you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Like I said, if anyone has any questions about Blue Gunlancer, I've been playing it since the dawn of time. So
Yep.
I've pretty much learned everything that I can about the class. I don't even look at Loawa for builds anymore. I just make them myself. So yeah, let me know if anyone has any questions. You can always reach out to me on Discord or on YouTube or when I'm live. I'm usually live Wednesdays and Thursdays when I'm off from work.
Yep. Doing big bosses. Oh,
Yeah,
much
facts.
love, Papi, and thank you again, bro. And anything you need, yo, hit me up for real.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you, man. We'll
Everyone
stay in
have a
touch.
good rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
All right, take care, man. His voice. What an interview. Ah, it's too good, bro. Put this video on YouTube right now. No, I gotta put it tomorrow. I gotta put it tomorrow, bro. I gotta get the thumbnail, the title, edit. Like I gotta do a few things. I'm tipping with Godino for the Chaos Gate. Oh, for real. Mano, me dieron ganas de revivir el Blue Gunlancer con lo que empecé a jugar hace años.